Since 1776, the United States has morphed territories into states and, in some cases, created borders that rely on arbitration rather than logic. Take southern Appalachia as an example. Below West Virginia, the Appalachian mountain range continues through Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The problem is the Appalachian Mountains only cover relatively tiny pieces of land in each state. It's like the US government tried its hardest to separate Appalachia and split it into several states, which to me feels wrong. I wonder if this is part of the reason why Appalachians get such a tiny bit of representation. I think Appalachia deserves its own state, and let me tell you why. First, let's talk geography. The southern Appalachian Mountains run through eastern Kentucky and western Virginia, down into East Tennessee and western North Carolina, and finally stop in North Alabama and Georgia. Naturally, this region, which spreads across 6 states, is vastly different than the other areas of those states. For example, the Appalachian Mountains reach into the upstate of South Carolina, but just barely. The rest of the state of South Carolina has nothing in common with the upstate. The upstate has mountains and hills, while the rest of the state is mostly flat, and even transitions into the Atlantic coastal area. The same can be said for North Carolina, but the mountains push a little further east in its case. And then there's my home state of Tennessee. In reality, there are 3 types of Tennesseans: East, Middle, and West. These subgroups have little to nothing in common with each other, especially when it comes to geography. On the east side of Tennessee, it's the Appalachian Mountains, and in the west, it's flat farmland, similar to what you would see in the Midwest. Geographically, I don't think eastern Tennessee has enough in common with western Tennessee to warrant them being grouped in the same state. The same goes for the Carolinas and the other partially Appalachian states. More so than geography, culture is vital to a state. More specifically, a common culture is important when looking at a state. When we look at these Appalachian states, they have opposite cultures on opposite sides of the states. Take North Carolina, for example. The western part of the state is very much the foundation of the southern Appalachian Mountains and the culture contained within. Compare this to the eastern part of the state, where there's a much stronger low-country coastal culture than an Appalachian one. The same can be said for South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, and Virginia. The cultures on either side of these states are so vastly different that it makes no sense to group them. It's a conflict of interest from the beginning. Instead, we should create a new state where a shared culture is normal. But why? Why do we need to create a new state with a shared culture? Well, first of all, I think when you group people of similar cultures, they tend to build communities rather than tribes. I think this could certainly be the case in a new southern Appalachian state. Perhaps the biggest reason why common culture could help a new southern Appalachian state is because of its history of carpetbaggers and snake oil salesmen. These people have taken advantage of southern Appalachia, and the only way to combat it is for Appalachian culture to outnumber outsiders in the political realm. If you have a state that contains multiple opposing cultures, it's nearly impossible to improve each state. Only by creating a common culture that will not allow outsiders to take advantage of southern Appalachia will you truly have a chance of saving the region. So what does this new Appalachian state look like and consist of? When thinking about creating new borders for a state, I believe it best to group as much of the geography and culture as possible. For this reason, our new state will have an unsettling shape. I imagine the western border of our state to be Crossville, Tennessee, where Eastern Time changes to Central Time. Going south, but staying in Eastern Time, we include Chattanooga, then shoot back east to Greenville, South Carolina, then to Charlotte, but not including Charlotte, up to Roanoke, back west to Lexington, and finally back south to Crossville. Everything inside this border is our new Appalachian state. I think these borders best represent a fair divide of geography and culture. Inside this newly minted state, communities will be stronger because people have more in common. Also, the people will get a better say in how their state is run because more people who are part of Appalachian culture will be voted into positions of power. And while we can't count on the good of man for anything, we can always hope.